And finally, we have reached the point where we will discuss a feature of IAM that has made life easier when it comes to managing access and policy refinement. And that is AWS IAM Access Analyzer. The biggest concern and the biggest problem with IAM is its security. And that is the reason why I kept this topic for the last. And I repeat my words again. The biggest problem and the biggest concern with IAM is its security. Let's read this statement and let's try and understand this. AWS IAM Access Analyzer helps you identify the resources in your organization and accounts, such as Amazon S3 buckets or IAM roles, shared with an external entity. This lets you identify unintended access to your resources and data, which is a security risk. Now you will have two doubts after listening to what I just said. What is an external entity? And second, what kind of security risks? The first point is an external entity can be another AWS account. It could be a root user, an IAM user, or a role. It could be a federated user. It could be an Amazon service or AWS service, or it could be an anonymous user, or it could be other entities that you can use to create a filter. And the security risk is considering the fact that the policies attached to an external entity could still be applicable or granted even though they don't need it any longer. So you might ask me, what could be the use case? A simple example would be, let's suppose you wrote a batch script and you wanted to access the production S3 bucket. And once you're done, you no longer need access to the S3 bucket. So once you're done with your work, you no longer need the access. Then how are you going to make sure the infrastructure remains secure if your policy remains intact even though you no longer need it? Then it would obviously violate the principle of least privilege. Having said that, you will still ask me, what is Access Analyzer? IAM Access Analyzer is a service that helps you identify the resources in your organization and accounts, such as Amazon S3 buckets or IAM roles, shared with an external entity. Now you will tell me, okay, but I can manually do the same thing. Why do I need IAM Access Analyzer? I'll sit as an admin and constantly check all the policies and make sure we are safe. But one thing you have to understand is that a security breach or security risk doesn't wait for your technical wokeness. Making sure you have a tool that can help you counter this is a far better solution than your self-righteous work ethic. I know it sounds harsh, but it is very serious. Now let's see what happens when we create an access analyzer for your account. Here, for each instance of the resource shared outside of the account, Access Analyzer generates a finding. It then shares all the information about access and the external principal granted to it. You get the information about who has access to your instance and its permissions. So that is the information that you get. And based on that, you determine whether the access is appropriate and safe, or if the access is unintended and are you at a security risk. And remember this very carefully. When you enable Access Analyzer in IAM, you create an analyzer for your entire organization or your account. The organization or account you choose is known as the zone of trust for your analyzer. This account that you enable Access Analyzer is called your zone of trust. Remember this, zone of trust. So when you enable Access Analyzer, you create an analyzer for your entire organization or your account, and the organization or account you choose is known as the zone of trust. The analyzer monitors all of the supported resources within your zone of trust, and any access to resources by principals within your zone of trust is considered trusted. That's what I wanted to tell you. And Access Analyzer can help you with these two things. First is validating policies. Here you can validate your policies using AWS Access Analyzer policy check, and Access Analyzer validates your policy against IAM policy grammar and the best practices. Second is generating policies. Here AWS IAM Access Analyzer analyzes your AWS CloudTrail logs. Understand this, it analyzes your CloudTrail logs to identify actions and services that have been used by an IAM entity. That could be a user or a role within your specified date range. It then generates an IAM policy that is based on that access activity. And when analyzing the policies, if the Access Analyzer identifies one that grants access to an external principal that isn't within your zone of trust, it generates a finding. And based on that finding, you can keep track of what is safe and what is the security risk, as I already explained you in the diagram above. So I hope you got the point. Let's move on. Here, Access Analyzer analyzes the resource-based policies that are applied to AWS regions or resources in the region where you have enabled Access Analyzer. And remember that only resource-based policies are analyzed. Remember this point very carefully. AWS IAM Access Analyzer analyzes the resource-based policies that are applied to AWS resources in the region where you enabled Access Analyzer. And remember that only resource-based policies are analyzed. So you might be thinking like, what are the services that could be used here or supported here? So here we have a list of resource types that are actually supported. So the first one is Amazon Simple Storage Service Bucket, that is the S3 buckets. We have AWS Identity and Access Management roles. We have AWS Key Management Service or KMS. We have Lambda functions and layers and SQS queues and AWS Secret Manager secrets. So these are the supported resource types. And I hope you got the point here.